Hello and welcome to the Peaceful Empowerment Work Show. We are live on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. I am your co-host Judy Forder, and I am here with my co-host in peace, Miss
Kris Burke. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Before we get started, if you would like to help share our message that through peaceful empowerment, you are able to become your own superhero, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.
Yay.
Today's topic, being the authority of your own life story.
And I just want to, because this is what I do, being the author, right? See how author's right in there. Did you notice that before, that author is like the root word of authority?
And that's important to point out for our friends that are listening through podcast.
Yeah. Good point.
Yes. So well done, Kris. Well done.
Thank you. Likewise, Judy.
There has been so much going on, so much shifting, so much happening so quickly that it was real easy to lose sight for me through these past couple months that I was the authority and author of my own life story.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were yesterday during when we were talking about the show. We met to plan about the show, and we were talking about how ego can be a sneaky little bitch.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you have fallen into a pattern, and you're like, "How in the hell did I get here?"
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, it surprised you to hear mine's a sneaky little bastard. The girls are all, we're all sweet.
Not
Yeah, to the guys out there listening, like my husband would be laughing right now. So he knows I don't really mean it. It's just fun.
Oy vey. We've talked a lot about, societal influences and generational patterns and things like that, and how they create the story that runs through our subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're going to talk about how do we rewrite that story?
Yeah. How do we rewrite that story? And before, so we're going to go through a pattern, but before we do that, maybe we could just see the map for just a moment. The map. And I think the one with the games. Oops. Yeah, because I said the map, and so one would think the one with the icons on it would be great. Not that this one doesn't work. Yeah, that's so perfect. Thank you. So in zone 1, where we're playing the poverty game, and for those of you who, are just tuning in for the first time, please bear with us here. So we're talking about zone 1. It will make sense as we go along. That's where, we're scared and we're feeling all those heavy feelings. And so just think for a moment, what kind of stories do you think we write for ourselves when we're in that zone?
I know for me, those are where all my "you're not enough" stories
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
You're not enough. You're the victim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when this kind of was first, trying to present itself or get clear in my mind, I named that the Romeo and Juliet quadrant. I said, this is where tragedies happen. This is where, and I thought it was interesting, because I saw the Romeo and Juliet story as like this incredible love story where these two people who had, tons of money and family connections and could have, there are a million different ways that you can see they run away together and they live happily ever after, or, they win over their parents, whatever the thing is. There are a million ways it could have gone well, but instead they just made bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. They didn't think things through. And this will be funny. I thought about it and said, yeah, they were clearly in zone 1.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They were not using, the rational mind was not present. Well, what happens if, right? There was none of that. Could there be a downside to this? They just acted and reacted, and they both ended up, in a pile.
Mhm.
motionless. So that's kind of how zone one kind of
Yeah.
works.
I keep hearing the word impulsive, very impulsive.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And we think that when we're being impulsive, and you guys know, like I spent plenty of time in zone one, when you're being impulsive, you actually are convinced that you have to act and you have to do this. And it has to be kind of rash and it has to be right now and it has to be quick. And Judy, you were talking about the pace of things earlier this week.
Yes, I had a delightful energy session on Sunday, and my practitioner looked at me and said, I keep hearing over and over again, you need to slow down. There's a lot of shifting that's been happening, and your body needs time to rest. And she's like slow down to the point of when you're putting on lotion, you put it on slowly. When you're walking from place to place, you walk slowly.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay. So I wake up Monday morning intentionally thinking, I'm going to move slowly today. And it just kind of blew my mind as to how much I did race around and for no reason. Like, why do I have to jump up off the couch and run to the kitchen? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So it's been a great week of me just moving, allowing myself to move slowly.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you're moving slowly, when you really, stop, when that impulse hits and you stop and take a breath and say, "Wait a minute, why do I think it needs to be like this? Or does it need to be like this?" You make space for you to become present. And as soon as you become present, you're out of zone one.
Hmm.
If you're walking down the hall thinking about your steps, you're present, you're in zone three.
Hmm.
If you're racing down the hall thinking about what you're going to have for lunch or what happened yesterday or what happened 3 years ago, you're not present. That's good zone one territory.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really been eye opening. I mean,
Mhm.
something as simple as intentionally moving your body slower.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, really connecting our movements with our minds and our emotions and just becoming one cohesive uh, little bio lab or something. Yeah. So moving into zone two, right? That's the dog eat dog. So that's where we're overcoming our fears. We're putting ourselves into a more powerful position. We're striving because we're going to win. We're going to get to the top of that mountain. We're going to have all this pride and glory and all of these lovely things. So you can think about, what kind of stories we're writing there. And again, the theme that I was kind of given at the same time that I was thinking about this is where Don Quixote would have lived. The guy that read so many stories about knights and fighting. And you think about, we talk about the battleground, right? This guy who read all of these medieval books about knights and chivalry and all this, so many books that he got caught up in the idea that he was actually a character in the book and living the book. And he would go places where there were perfectly lovely things happening, and he would see a battle occurring and he would fight it. Right? So he was under the impression that he was winning all these great battles, but actually he was mostly just getting himself in trouble while everybody kind of, elbowed one another and whispered and said, "What's with the dude?"
What's up with that guy?
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, there are English comp professors everywhere, like rolling on the ground, like, what did she just say? It was very abridged. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I think of zone two and you talk about dog eat dog, all I hear is all I do is win, 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 no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Yes. That's where that's where we want to win.
Hmm. We're fighting
Um,
to get through. We're
uh-huh.
going to persevere. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So, those stories, one of them, you just like, why bother getting out of bed, right? The stories we write in zone one, why bother getting out of bed? I'm just going to lose anyway.
Hmm.
So, those aren't super great stories to experience. In zone two, we're moving as fast as we possibly can. We're completely overwhelmed. We don't have time to notice that we're racing through life without actually noticing our experiences,
Mhm.
without having the ability to enjoy our experience because we're going so fast and we're living so much in our heads, um, that, by the time we think about an experience, it's ancient history, right?
Mhm.
It's memory. And then we get into zone three. And, this is where we start saying, gee, I wonder. We're asking questions. Um, this actually, there are a million stories, I think, written about zone three, people who found themselves in zone three, who started looking at life differently and were like, I've got to tell people about this. And one of my favorites, of course, is The Wizard of Oz, right? Alice in Wonderland. Uh, of course, I'm not going to think of a million right now, but there are a lot of them, and a lot of them are fiction because it's much easier to talk to people
Uh,
about, um, what the possibilities are when we're talking fictional characters, because then we don't get it doesn't take us out of our comfort zone if we're talking about make believe.
mhm. Well, it's funny because, the parents out there watch cartoons and the Disney things and all that, and immediately I thought of Frozen.
Yes.
Hmm. All of those where there's this story told over and over and over again, and then you come to find once you remove yourself, she literally removed herself from the kingdom and realized that she had a gift,
Yes.
you know.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And that also strikes me very much as zone four, right? Where we really, so in zone three, we're really trying to figure out, like, we still have all of our family conditioning
Mhm.
and all of our cultural conditioning. It's still there, right? And we still kind of assume it's true because it's always been there. We don't remember it not being there. So in zone three is when we're really trying to question, like, what's me? Like, what's fundamentally me? And what's my belief system? What's here? What am I perceiving and experiencing simply because it's part of my beliefs? Like, if I were to change it, then my experience would change, right? So there are parts of us that anything we do, we're still going to have, this is still going to be happening right now. But there are other parts of us that, and this is where our life story comes in. The story we're writing, if we change our story, our experience fundamentally changes, right? So that means there's an element of choice going on. And in that zone three is where we're really starting to realize, wow, I'm not my experiences. I am someone having experiences. Ultimately, we find out I am someone who's greatly influencing my experiences, but I am not my experiences. So, no matter how many, mistakes or wrong paths or whatever I may have done or think I have done in my life, ultimately, I'm this person who gets to now have a completely different kind of experience if I am willing to let go of my old stories.
Yes. And that's the big one right there. And I know I've said this in previous shows, but when you realize that you have that type of power and influence over your life, at first it's a little difficult. It's a hard pill to swallow
Mhm.
because you look back and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And the big thing for me was when I looked back and did all that, the natural subconscious ego loop was to beat the shit out of myself for being so dumb that you didn't realize what you were doing, and then when you can pull back and look at it from a zone 3 level, it's like, okay, so there were an awful lot of lessons that I needed to learn through all that
Yeah.
so that I could get to this space and stand on this observation deck and look back over it and give myself grace
Yes.
and gratitude.
Mm. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And that's the crafty ego, isn't it? I mean, that's where when we talk about the ego being crafty or clever, anything that you can feel guilt or shame, excuse me, or regret or grief, sadness or anger, it's going to pull that up and put it in your face because that is what allows it to stay in control, which it does because it thinks it's protecting itself.
Mhm.
Right. So it feels afraid because when we're on a battleground, whether you're in zone 1 or zone 2, fear is driving you.
Yes. Ego
That's,
is driving your bus.
yeah. Yep. Yeah. And a lot of times we say souls, hovering out there like, yeah, when you decide you're sick of that, let me know, cue me in. But I don't feel like being in that experience because it's terrible.
Exactly. Exactly. And last week we talked about, driving around in the clown car.
Yeah.
That's ego's driving that car.
Yes. Yes. I can just feel people getting offended by that everywhere. And, I can just like, you say, what? And to just realize that we gotta look at it and laugh our way through because every time we get upset, we just throw ourselves back into the place where we really are powerless.
Mhm.
When we're in zone 1, we know we're powerless, like we feel powerless, and it's because we're not using our gifts. We're not using what we're capable of using, our
Mhm.
intention and our storytelling ability to create our reality. And in zone 2, we're telling ourselves a story that we're winning, but we're not realizing, we don't zoom out very far. We can only look right here because if we were to zoom out at what's going to be happening 100 years from now, right? It's really hard to hold on to that I'm winning when you think about, well, yeah, what is there to win, right? And this is not actually such a bad thing because that's what usually nudges people into zone 3 where they start going, wait a minute, what is this whole thing about?
Mhm.
Is this really a tragedy that we're living? And, I'll tell you 100% of the time, you start asking these kinds of questions and people start getting answers that are very encouraging.
The only reason I even brought up the clown car is because I was driving around. I've been driving around in my clown car for the past probably month and a half at least now. And it was
Sure.
interesting to me that, it was this one experience
Hmm.
that I started driving and didn't even notice that I was in it. And every, other experiences, other avenues of my life, not in the clown car.
Right.
So, like, okay, I'm here, I'm good. There's no clowning in my life right now.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, all of a sudden it was like, motherfucker.
Exactly. And you go honk honk.
And it was Kris that looked at me and said, Judy, it's impossible for you to be in that experience because you're not the same person now that you were then. And that's what got me out of the clown car
Yeah.
because it's absolutely true.
I
So
I actually I've got to say, um, I said, I think you might have a manufactured problem.
yes, that is exactly what you said.
So think about that. I mean, I'm going to use that. I've used that with myself since then,
Hmm.
right? Is this person experiencing a real problem? Is there a real problem happening? Or are we manufacturing a problem
Hmm.
for any one of a number of reasons? Because once upon a time, it was a problem, right? Under different circumstances. But,
Yep.
just because we see a crumb, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean we know what it's from. It could be blueberry pie, it could be, your favorite cookies. Like you don't know, but that's how our mind works. It's how the ego works is it'll see a crumb and go, "Ha, I know exactly what that is." And I know what's going to happen when we eat it, and it has this whole story ready to go.
Hmm.
So we want to watch and say, "Wait a minute, do I know all of that information or am I just projecting all of that based on, that crumb? It could frankly be anything."
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. It was like that crumb was there, and it threw me back into this space of, oh, here we go again.
Right.
Not being able to, I was doing all the zone 2 things. all right, this is what we got to do. Blah, 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 blah.
I'm going to fix it.
I'm going to fix it. Everything's going to be great. It won't be like it was before.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is what we do when we write these stories. So this is why our stories are so important, and having awareness of our story is important. I can tell you 100% that writing a story that's themed based on what's happening in zone 3, that curiosity and creativity, or zone 4, which is like really wanting an understanding of your cosmic essence, your being, like what is my nature? What is this life story, kind of the hero's journey, right? Whichever one of those like interests you is the one for you to be exploring and writing on. And those give incredible experiences, and there's just so much growth and so much joy, and things fall into place, right? And if you're writing a story in zone 1 or 2, there can be lots of really important lessons to learn. Um, you might have experiences that that you're here to have. Just realize that in those zone 1 and zone 2 storylines, there's going to be a lot of suffering, and 99% of the time, it's going to be you who's doing it.
Gulp. Another
Yeah.
hard swallow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the only reason I didn't say 100% of the time is because I don't know, is there 1% of the time where something else could be happening? Maybe. I couldn't possibly say, but I'll tell you, with me, I never found a time when I wasn't the one suffering those storylines.
Yes, we choose to keep them running because we don't know any better yet. And then when we do know better, it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult because those stories have run consciously and subconsciously for our entire lives.
Yeah.
So to think that you can snap your fingers and it be done, oh, I don't think that way anymore. It's all over. That's not realistic. Will there be a time where that can happen? I certainly hope so.
Mhm.
And I feel like it's easier now than back when we got started.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
But it takes work and it takes dedication, because
Mhm.
when those thoughts come up and that storyline starts running, we need to be able to pause, identify it, and decide, do I need to stay in this loop? Is this story still accurate for me, or would
Yeah.
I like to rewrite? I would like to write something new.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, write yourself a love story,
Mm,
and give yourself permission to live it, to experience it, to receive love from just everything and everyone around you. That, when we get into this love story vibration, where we're really like, I'm worthy of love. And this is one of the things that people have a hard time with because of our conditioning on the battleground. The moment that you recognize how worthy of love you are is exactly the same moment when you recognize everyone is worthy of love, right? There is no like, I'm worthy of love and it's too bad for you, bucko. There's none of that, because that recognition, like, of course I would be worthy of love. Of course we would all be worthy of love. Like, we are we are conditioned to give ourselves a hard time, and so we experience ourselves as really deserving a hard time, right? Because we keep asking, why is this so hard? And people keep giving us lots of reasons.
mm,
Well, if we had grown up in an environment where people were telling us from the time we arrived here how worthy of love we were, and teaching us all the different reasons that we were worthy of love, and how to access that love, and how to have an incredible, collaborative, friendly experience, we'd be doing that. We wouldn't know any different,
mm-mm. No,
right?
and we had a society that supported that. Yes, we
Yeah,
wouldn't know any different.
we would not.
We
And
would.
we probably wouldn't have spent the last 15 years trying to figure out why everything was so miserable.
We wouldn't have to have this show.
We would not. And actually, that would be sad. So maybe that's exactly why the entire kingdom is like it is.
Just so we can work together on this show.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Look at that. We found the reason.
We did. We did. Yeah, and now it's like I never look at the time, so you've probably noticed I'm always really surprised when they're like, "Oh, the show's over." So, we've got 20 minutes if we're like really generous with ourselves, which we're feeling generous. Uh, so we should probably go through our, you know, taking it through the horse story.
We're going to take it through the map.
Yeah,
And remember, you can get your map at www.masterfulu.com/get-your-map.
yeah.
All right, Kris, you have a wonderful horse story that hits all the marks.
It certainly does. Yeah. Um, so it was really fun. Yesterday, actually, Judy got to hear my entire life story. I don't think I left anything out. Um,
Beautiful.
Thank you. As things were integrating, right? So as pieces were coming up, and it was like, oh, I'm looking at this from the love story eyes or through the love story eyes now. And so it looks different. And so, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Um, so I was integrating that. And for those of you, I'm sharing that because for those of you who are consciously like working on doing energy work and realizing that things are coming up and you're wanting to reintegrate them into your biosphere, then you'll understand that once I started picking things up, it's like a lot more came that I anticipated. So the good news is today we're going to get, the thread and not like all the balls of yarn. Um, but as a child, so my parents got divorced and we ended up moving in with my grandparents when I was 6 years old. And it kind of felt, as it does to people when all of those things happen, like I had this kind of life that looked like what I thought life was supposed to look like. And then that got changed and I felt a little bit lost. And what does this mean? And why did things like this why did this happen to me? Right. And when you're a child, one of the interesting things is, and so many of us know, because like 75% of our generation was raised by single parents, so I'm hardly alone. But when you're a child looking at this situation, you do feel like you're the only one. It's an interesting thing. It's like everybody else's family is still intact and mine is not. So there was a feeling of loss, and I ended up um, I don't know, seeing horses, and I remember this moment of like seeing a horse and going like, "What's that?" Right? And my dad actually ended up getting horses, and I would go see him every other weekend, and I made a relationship with these two horses, and then they were going to sell one of them. And I wanted a horse in the worst way. I begged, probably relentlessly. So thanks, mom, for not, drowning me. Um, to have a horse, and we lived in a village, and we lived with my grandparents, and my grandfather and grandmother were older and not in good health, and so they weren't the happiest people in the world because when you're in pain all of the time and kind of at the end of life, not super fun. So they didn't want anything to do with uh, having a horse, or there were a million reasons why I couldn't have one. We didn't have the money, we didn't have the land, my grandfather wouldn't allow it. You couldn't have horses in the town, in the village, which actually wasn't true. Um, in fact, none of these things were true, but they threw a million reasons at me. And all of those, you might notice, are all pretty much zone one reasons, right? So, it's all these you can't just because you're just because people like us can't have the things that we really want. What is it about you that makes you think you can have something so extravagant? Right? And
Who do you think you are?
yeah, who do you think you are? Yeah, absolutely. You hear that if you live in a community where there's a lot of poverty. When people dare to dream, they usually get shot down pretty quickly. So, because it's offensive to people who have decided this is their lot in life and they're victims and there's nothing they can do about it. If you come along and you're not a victim, well, that kind of makes it hard to hold on to the victim mentality, right?
Absolutely.
So I did not actually, I was young. I could feel in my heart that was what I wanted. I was a little, looking for something. And so I refused to believe all of the things. And this is key. I refused to believe all of the things that they talked about were insurmountable. Right. So it's not like I denied. We did, in fact, live in the village. My grandfather was, in fact, fairly grumpy a lot of the time. There, like, these things were true. But I didn't accept those as rock hard walls that could not be climbed over or
Mhm,
surmounted. I saw them as things that, well, there must be a way. Right.
mhm.
And so when, the other kids were building snowmen, I built snow horses. When the other kids were walking to the bus stop, I rode my imaginary horse. I mean, I must have looked quite interesting, but I practiced riding for years before I actually had a horse to ride.
Talk about the elbows. Look at that one. Got
So,
quite the gallop.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it did make a lot of people, you know, prickly toward me
Mhm.
because, dreamers, and a lot of you out there, I can feel some people are going to be just about in tears right now. Because there are dreamers everywhere. In every town, there are people that, for whatever reason, your dream was strong. You could feel what was in your heart. You were aware of it. And at least for a while, you intended to live that dream out because that is part of us. That is kind of central to our being, is that we would follow our hearts and have the experience um, intended. And
I'm
where
hearing
did,
your imagination kept your dream alive. You
yes.
allowed yourself to play.
I absolutely did. And that's, yeah, thank you for making that point, because a lot of the building the snow horses and riding the imaginary horses, of course, exactly what was I doing? I was imagining.
Mhm.
I was imagining that I was doing this.
Yeah.
And I wasn't imagining it and saying, "Oh, woe is me. I'm only imagining this."
Mhm.
I was imagining it and I was enjoying the process of imagining.
Yep.
I feel like, underline that and highlight it a whole bunch of times.
Yeah, that's huge
It is
because you
huge.
didn't know what you were doing, but you were keeping yourself in that higher vibration.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
That's what play does.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so lo and behold, the day comes 2 days before the end of my fifth grade year, where my mom and my dad and stepmom are going to sell this horse that I've fallen in love with. And I just become a mess and fall apart and beg, and it's no. And I said, well, then I'm going to go live with them, which, there was a part of me that was like, I have to have this in my life. And I'm not going to tell you that was conscious, but that's how I was acting, as someone who knew I needed this in my life. And so actually, my mom pulled out a magic wand and Houdini'd the whole thing and got my grandfather somehow to agree. And I ended up getting my horse. So I cleaned the house every Friday after school for $5 a week for a long time to pay for my horse. And I'm quite a good little housekeeper now, I might say. And yeah, and one of the interesting things is that I was so happy to do it. I mean, I don't think there was anything they could have said, okay, if, and I wouldn't have thought, well, great. I did. I didn't care.
Old.
Yeah. So yeah. So we got the horse, and I very quickly found out, like, well, I didn't know how to ride. I didn't know anything about horses. I didn't have a saddle. So I got on my horse the first day, all excited, and she immediately took me bareback through the trees, and I got all scratched up, and I came in the house crying. And again, this is one of those places where people had said all the things I just said. I mean, it was true. I didn't know how to ride. I didn't know a thing. I didn't have a saddle. Like, all of that was very true, but I was undeterred because this was going to happen. This was my dream. Um, and my mom called a riding school in the town next to us, and we ended up going there and we started taking lessons. And it was still true that we did not have extra money. I ended up working at the riding school full time in the summers and taking one, or actually ended up being most days two, free riding lessons every day in exchange for working from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I did that for years with people that I loved in an environment that I loved, doing something that I loved. And I experienced as a child that you can live your dreams, not only that you can, but how incredible it is when you do. Yeah.
Against all odds. The
Again,
stories being told were no,
yes,
no, 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 no. That's impossible. That's impossible.
yes,
But the little dreamer in you was like, mm-mm, no, thank you. I
yes,
don't accept that. I'm going to have a horse. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm going to have a horse.
yes, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then an interesting thing happened, right? So we're going to move into zone two a little bit here. An interesting thing happened is that my family kind of said, that's great that you're doing this. And they were supportive of me having the horse and, making sure that I had a way to get to work and all of those things. And then the messaging started being, but this is fine when you're a kid, but adults can't, we can't work for free and get a riding lesson. We have to actually make money. And so you're going to have to grow up. And when I was in high school, I remember how angry that would make me. I mean, I would just feel furious. In part, I know now I felt furious because I knew in my heart it wasn't true, but I didn't know what the alternative was because I'd never been an adult. And all of the adults in my life said, yeah, every kid has a dream. You'll get over it. You'll realize you can't live it. You're going to have to what? I mean, I literally had people saying to me, like, you're going to have to get a good job with a good pension and marry a nice guy.
Yeah.
This is what life has in store for you. And I was like, ick.
Yeah. You made me laugh yesterday so hard when you were like, yeah. They were like, oh, that's a nice dream. You'll get over it.
Yes. Yes. And so during high school, I started putting on weight. I started getting depressed. I started having anxiety attacks, right? So it's really funny. I was 50 pounds heavier than I am now in high school. And so I don't mean like I put on 3 or 4 pounds. I mean like I put on weight. It was noticeable. And that I felt trapped, that I felt heavy, that I didn't have the energy of my dream that had been propelling me. Um, that I was losing that I was losing touch with that. I didn't know the way forward. And that's how it showed up in me. I think it shows up that way in a lot of people. It doesn't mean it has to be. But it's common when we start to feel like we can't move forward. That can be a common expression.
Mm-hmm. That
So,
chronic pain.
yes, and chronic pain, absolutely. Absolutely. So looking back, now I can see, wow, it was like all the classic signs of I'm believing something that's literally making me sick. I developed bleeding ulcers and, the panic attacks and all kinds of things because I really was trying to reconcile myself to you can't live your dream.
Mhm.
And if I tried, whenever I stood up for I'm going to find a way, um, I received a lot of ridicule. People are just like, you're delusional. You've got to face reality. Why do you think the rules apply to everybody but you? Like all of these things, which, now that people say that to me all the time, and I'm like, uh-huh, right? Because and people don't say it as much now. But over the course of, 15 years ago, certainly they did. But
Mhm.
now, because of my experience, I know I don't need anybody to validate or to agree anymore. But back then as a 16, 17-year-old kid, I did.
Mhm.
And that wasn't available. I think it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate. Judy and I talk about this, why we're so passionate about doing the work we do is because we look back at key points in our lives and go, wow, if I'd known,
Oh yeah.
right? I mean, it just it could have saved a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, we look back and the lessons were learned, but we talk about choosing lessons under fire or ease and grace. We didn't know
Yeah,
we had that choice. We were running with the stories and the beliefs that we had and doing the best we could.
right.
And the big thing with Kris and her story is, she had that dreamer and that dreamer was alive and it supported her whole I'm going to have a horse. And she
Yeah,
got a horse. And having that horse was something that really served her in so many positive ways.
yeah,
And then for you to be told, all right, now you got to be an adult, get rid of that dream. You
yeah.
can't possibly do what you love and make money at it.
Right,
So get rid of it and move forward.
right, right. Deal with the fact that, you're just you,
Yep.
right? And
There's
all
no
of us,
about you. You shouldn't be able to love what you do and get paid for it. All
yes.
those things.
Yes, yes. Meanwhile, right, I go out into the world and I decide, well, I want to go to college.
Hmm.
And I was always knew I was going to college. And then I got to college age and it was, well, how are you going to pay for that? And I thought, well, gee, I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of things I didn't know. And at 17, I sure was convinced that I was supposed to know all of these things. So I beat myself up pretty heavily. And then I went to Boston. I moved to Boston and I ended up temping. I was temping at a college and as in an administrative role. And this guy came up to me and who worked there and he said, who are you and where are you from and what are you doing here? And I said, well, I want to go to college, but I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. And he said, wow, you know what? I just left a job at Northeastern University and they're still looking to hire somebody. And if you work there full time during the days, you get great benefits and you can go to school at night for free. So he called the dean of that college at Northeastern within the university, called the dean of the College of Liberal Arts, actually. And she met with me and she hired me.
So
And that,
again, I'm going to go to college. I don't know how, but I'm going. And the universe is like, okay, Kris, here's your path.
yes, yes, yes. And how many times have we said over the last, I don't know, especially like last 6 years, we're really starting, you start to figure out, because it's not like somebody was explaining this as we're going. Things were happening, and I'm looking around and I'm going, oh, good, I got lucky because that was kind of the framework I had.
Hmm.
Like I didn't understand that if I just gave myself permission to follow what was in my heart, that the path would appear. I don't have to know how, right? Because as I like to say, the little hamster in the wheel, I have a very dutiful hamster in the wheel that I call my ego. Yeah, sometimes it's a goldfish and sometimes it's a hamster. It's very dutiful and intelligent and knows a lot of things, but it doesn't know enough and doesn't have enough reach to be able to bring about the kinds of miracles that have to occur and do occur every day in our lives that we just sort of, brush off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the person you meet that changes your life, the person you meet who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. I mean, how is meeting that person not miraculous?
Exactly. Exactly. And I know I've talked about my nephew before, Jack and his life. Everybody's like, he's like the Forrest Gump walking through life where wonderful things just happen to him. And we've discussed this before. It's like he's got an idea how things are going to happen or how, what he wants, and he expects nothing less.
Yes.
He doesn't try to figure out how to make it happen. It's just, this is what I want. Okay.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
shows. So that's, when we're talking about rewriting your story, that's a lot what we're talking about. We, in the battlefield, we're convinced that we have to figure everything out.
Mhm.
But in the oasis, we understand that, if Kris wanted to go to college, she didn't try to figure out how it was going to happen. She let it sit, and the universe showed up and gave her the path.
Yeah. And
All we
I do want to say, I tried a couple of different approaches that didn't really work out, and I beat myself up about it.
Mhm.
And so it's not like, I just sat there and went, I'll wait for it to come to me, because that was not happening.
Okay.
Yeah. I just want people to be clear. If you're struggling, you're on path.
Yeah. So we got to wrap things up, but the moral of the story is really look back. Ask yourself, what are these stories that I keep telling myself? Are they true now? And am I ready to rewrite and see what I want to put out there for my future? And remember, don't mind F yourself. It's not our job to figure everything out because we don't have all the information.
Mm-mm.
Put it out there and let the universe do what it does.
Yeah.
What's the next right step that I
Yeah.
have to do for me? That's for my highest and greatest good.
And watch yourself whenever you say things like, I don't believe in that, because our beliefs will limit what we're able to experience, what's possible for it. They don't change what is possible, but they will limit what we will be able to perceive and experience as possible. So everybody else in the world could be having a fantastic experience. You'll be living inside the box created by your beliefs.
Perfect. Perfect. That's a great way to end it. This is the Peaceful
Mic
and Powerful.
drop.
Oh.
It is. We hope you're feeling peacefully empowered.
Yes, we certainly do. There are 3 ways of engagement. And of course, you can continue watching the show, workshops, and we have our 12-week course.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us, and choose peace.
Absolutely. Thanks, Judy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kris. Thanks, Cece. Bye-bye.